Do you think meaning is something that we discover or something we create? Like, do humans intrinsically try to find meaning in everything, or should we? And then I wrote, should we bother or just have a nice time?
Yeah, well, maybe those two are the same thing. You know, having a nice time isn't always easy. Like sometimes that takes some proactive effort. Meaning, the first question that needs to be asked is the unintentionally ironic question of what does meaning mean? Like when you use the word meaning, what are you talking about, right? Some people, everybody has a general understanding of the kind of thing we're talking about. It's something like, like a reason to be, a reason to act, a reason to care about stuff. I think like meaning and purpose are synonyms essentially in the way people use them. Like what's your purpose? And a purpose, literally speaking, is just a reason to act. What is your purpose in, writing a homework essay? That's to, get a good grade. That is literally the purpose of that action. The grand question of purpose of life is when you just keep asking that question over and over again. Like, why are you writing the paper? Well, to get a good grade. Well, why do you want a good grade? Well, because then I'll pass my exams. Why do you want to pass your exams? So I can get a good job. Why do you want a good job? So I can make money. Why do you want to make money? So I can provide for my family. Why do you want to provide for your family? Because I don't want them to suffer and die. And eventually you'll get to a question that seems a bit silly. Like, well, why don't you want your family to, suffer and die? And most people at some point find themselves just going, I just don't. That is just, it's just as true to me as that the sky is blue. I don't know why the sky is blue. I just know that it is, right? I know that, that suffering would be bad. And wherever that question bottoms out, I think is what your purpose is in life. The question for the philosopher is like, well, is that purpose justified? Are we all deluding ourselves? Does it actually matter? Oh, maybe we should all just suffer and die. Like, who cares? And that's when you really get into the weeds. But I think that in practice, people can discover what their current purpose is by just asking that question and taking it all the way and seeing where it ends. But if you're talking about like, true meaning, like, because in theory, somebody could say, oh, I don't care about my family, I don't care about suffering and all that kind of stuff. So they're motivated in a different way and their purpose, practically speaking, might be totally different to yours. And so there's a separate question of like, are there some purposes which are like true or correct and other purposes which are misguided or wrong? So if you can just create your own purpose, a lot of people say, I'm just going to make up my own meaning in life. There's no God, there's no objective purpose, so I'm just going to make it up, right? Sure, and a lot of people are consoled by that, but that means if someone decides that their meaning in life is just counting the blades of grass in their garden, that's just what they decide is the meaning, that's just what they want to do with their lives. And another person decides to devote their life to donating money to Oxfam and fundraising for charity, that those two lives are equally meaningful. Because as long as each person feels like that's where they get their meaning from, then they've both got meaningful lives. But we kind of look at that and want to say something like, no, that second person's life is actually more meaningful. Even if they feel the same to each person, there's something that's actually more meaningful, which would imply that we believe that there's some correct source of meaning.
There's an intrinsic
that people
meaning
can have.
To people in life.
And then the question is, where does that come from? So in practice, I think people discover meaning. But I think that when it comes to trying to come up with what is like the true correct meaning for human existence, most of the time philosophers are essentially inventing, answers to that question. But yeah, you can keep asking that question over and over again. Why do you do this?
And do you have, of those philosophers' questions, do you find that you have one that aligns with what you think, that you think reigns truest?
I always struggle to answer questions about meaning because, like, I don't know. I sometimes, in my more pessimistic moments, I think that we're just sort of evolved apes who have these desires within us. It's like the reason you eat is because you're hungry. And I could say to you that, like, the reason why you feel hunger is because it's an evolutionary advantage, because you'll die without food and there might have been people who didn't care about their death, but they get wiped out. And it just so happens that the people who survive do care about death because that's why they survived. And hunger develops as an evolutionary tool to make us eat. And that could be like the real reason why you're feeling hungry. But you are still feeling hungry. So you still have hunger, even though I've explained to you, why you have it, and it's all essentially arbitrary.
Yeah.
So I could say to you, the reason why you feel like you need to get out of bed in the morning and, care for your family and stuff, like, oh, it's all just evolution. Like, why do you care more for, say, your brother than your cousin? Why do you care more for a cousin than a stranger? Usually, all other things being equal. Why? Is it because there's some true morality of the universe that says that brothers are worth more than cousins? Or is it because you happen to share more genetics with your brother than your cousins? Could that have something to do with the way?
Absolutely.
So you could say, the reason why you feel these moral ideas and the purpose that you have in life is just evolution. It's just some arbitrary selection process. But you still feel it. It's still there. You're still hungry. You're still going to want to go and get food. So you still love your family. You still genuinely, and it's not like, it's not true that you love your family. Like you do. You can understand why you love your family, but that doesn't reduce that love to the explanation. It just explains why you have it. In the same way that explaining why you're hungry doesn't make you not hungry. Yeah, sure, it's a bit depressing now you know why you're hungry and it's all a bit arbitrary, but you're still genuinely hungry. And so if it is all essentially just arbitrary and meaningless, you still feel the meaning. And that's still actually sincere. It's like really something you're actually feeling. You do love people. You do want to get out of bed in the morning. And that is, literally speaking, I think what people's purposes are.
Yeah, just whatever drives them.
Yeah.
And have you personally found meaning?
On a practical level, yes, because, there are things which I care about. Like I care about, the well-being of myself and the people who I care about. But if you ask me, like, well, if you were being a philosopher and you said, but why should you care about those other people? I think I would have to just say, I just do. I don't know. So have I found meaning? I haven't found a satisfying answer that would convince a psychopath that they should care about other people.
Right, okay.
Like there's some moral truth of the universe that you must abide by. I find it very difficult to say that. But for myself, I just know that I do have particular sort of drives. But these two questions are related as well, because I've been doing a lot of thinking about consciousness recently, as I said, and this question about where we go after we die, and also is there like meaning? The idea that consciousness is more like foundational and ubiquitous.
I watched this video, yeah, I'm
all this
familiar
kind
with
of
this
stuff.
idea.
That kind of stuff plays into this too, because
I showed
know
you a
we
little
watched
bit
it,
of
but
this
just
one.
as well.
You're better explaining it than me, to be fair.
How do you think, Jack?
Yeah, probably. I sort of got sat down. We did. This is the one video I put on.
We
with
watched
you.
it. No, but just
together.
to clue everyone in.
It gets a little bit. I'm not sure which video you're talking about.
The one where you
actually,
spoke a bit about panpsychism.
Yeah. So the consciousness is a great mystery that most people don't spend very much time thinking about at all. Like we think that we're interacting with a material world around us, right? There's a table here, there's a microphone in front of me, but every single thing that you interact with in the universe is through your experience, right? You cannot step outside of your own experience. So when I say that like there's a microphone here, what I mean is that I have a conscious experience of like seeing a microphone. I'm having a visual experience. If I shut my eyes, it's not there anymore, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Well, okay, but I can touch it. But touch is also an experience. The hearing is an experience. There's no way that I can interact with this microphone directly. We like to think
you as the consciousness.
Yeah, me as like whatever's inside, the brain, the monkey controlling the sticks. There's no way for whatever's inside me to just sort of reach out and ascertain the real world. It has to be through sensors. So you can imagine like you're flying an airplane and you've got this dashboard in front of you and you've got all of these indicators, and there are sensors on the outside, and the sensors are picking up the air pressure and the altitude, and they're showing you on the inside, numbers on a dashboard, right? You have to interact with the outside world sort of through that dashboard, right? So what you're really interacting with is a dashboard, and the dashboard is sort of giving you information from the outside. Yeah. So similarly, there is stuff out there, but the way we interact with it is all through experience. So like this experience is like foundational to the way we move through the world. And it is a complete mystery to us, like why experience exists. I mean, it seems plausible that there could have just been things like tables and rocks. And even if life evolves, it could all just be sort of oyster brains or jellyfish.
I see what you're saying, like that sort of automatic sort of, life goes on because it sort of just does.
There's a concept introduced by a chap called Bob Kirk some decades ago called the philosophical zombie. And he imagines somebody who just has a brain just like you and I, and their brain is firing neurons just the same way. And, you know, when there's some kind of external stimulus, parts of their brain light up and this kind of stuff. But there's no experience. It does everything that your brain does, but there's no internal world. It's just a robot, essentially, that just has absolutely no internal experience. It seems possible to imagine such a being. So it seems like a complete mystery to philosophers why it is that you've got all this brain stuff going on. You've got electrochemical signals firing in this mushy thing in a skull, but that could have just existed. But it comes alongside with this thing called experience, which like a table doesn't have. It's nothing it's like to be a table, but there's something it's like to be us. And that is extremely strange.
I think, but like, do plants, do they feel like pain and stuff? Do they?
Well, we don't know. We don't know, right? But it seems intuitively most people want to say no.
Venus flytraps.
It doesn't seem like they feel pain, right? And one of the reasons why it seems like they don't feel pain is because when we know something's in pain, because I can know when you're in pain, I can know when an animal's in pain. What we can do is we can look at what they've got in common. Well, what's similar between if I, you know, pinch my finger and it really hurts, and I pinch your finger and it really hurts. You know, what is the same about those two experiences? Well,
ow.
Yeah, there's a reaction. That's true. So that's how I know you're in pain.
What?
But when I'm looking for like, well, how do I know that that's not just someone shouting? Well, I also know that when I do this, if I scan my brain, there's a particular part of my brain which is correlated with the experience. So when I have the experience, there's a part of the brain that also lights up at the same time. And so when I look at you and I see that in you, your experience also lines up with this brain activity.
Yeah.
We've got some information there, right? And so we could look at an animal and we could say, well, if I cause it pain, if it's got the same part of the brain that we do and it also lights up, we can say, it probably feels pain. But then you look at a plant, which doesn't have a central nervous system, it doesn't have a brain, it lacks the thing which is always correlated with pain in humans. So we say it probably doesn't feel pain. Now, that's not enough to say that it definitely doesn't feel pain. We don't know that.
Yeah.
But it
seems more likely.
It gives us good reason to doubt it.